Some of the events, meetings that have been taking place since the last update, I'll just run through. At the end of, or the middle of August, we had attended the closing ceremonies of the Pan Am Games, and prior to that I had the privilege of presenting some medals to the soccer team that won the Pan Soccer Games. After the Pan Games are now over, we now need to look to the North American Indigenous Games, which are going to be held in Toronto and at Six Nations in July of 2016. The lacrosse portion of the games will be held here, so now we're involved in the planning committee, and those meetings started the day right after the Pan Am Games closed, so we're going to be involved in that. I also took part in a Chiefs of Ontario Political Confederacy meeting. And on August 17th, 18th, and 19th, the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario, which is comprised of all of the mayors in the province, came together in an assembly at Niagara Falls, and we were asked to welcome there, and Ray Miracle did that on August 17th, and I was a participant on a First Nations panel that spoke to all of the delegates on August 18th, along with the Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day, Chief Brian Laforme, Grand Chief Patrick Madabi from the Anishinaabe Nation, and Chief Fawn Wabiok from Shoal Lake. Our presentation was very well received, and I think it's a good step into starting to educate people about who we are as First Nations. On August 21st, we had the former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Paul Martin, in our community, who was on a campaign trail with Daniel Tagiks, who is the Liberal candidate in Brant. But we did take the opportunity to inform Mr. Martin about, a lot of issues here in our community, particularly education, because he does have the Martin Aboriginal Initiative Fund. He visited Polytech and listened to a number of educators about some of the concerns we have. He also had lunch at New Credit, and then we took him on a tour of the water treatment plant. He ended the day at Woodland Cultural Centre with a roundtable which was organized by the Cultural Centre staff, and it included presentations by a number of organizations and individuals who just wanted to get information again out to Mr. Martin. He was quite happy to be here, and he did commit to come back and help us on a number of issues. We also had our fall fair on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd of August, and it wasn't as well attended as it was in previous years, so I'm calling out to the community that we all need to come together to see how we could get the fair back to what it used to be. So we are going to be celebrating the 150th anniversary in 2 years. So I think as a community we should try and come together and help boost the fair back up to what it was. The Miss Six Nations contest was held on August 21st, and I was privileged to be asked to be a judge for that. And I just want to congratulate all the winners from Miss Six Nations, Miss Teen, Miss Preteen, the Little Miss, Miss Minnie, and the Tiny Tots. They're all going to be fine ambassadors for our community for the next year. On August 24th, the Premier of Ontario, Kathleen Wynne, and the Ontario Regional Chief, Isidore Day, signed a political accord between the province of Ontario and the First Nations, which outlines a new relationship that will take place between us, and hopefully we can move forward on different areas such as jurisdiction and resource benefit sharing and other issues that may come up from time to time. Councillor Carl Hill attended that signing ceremony on behalf of Six Nations, and this process will only add to individual processes like Six Nations has or other areas in the province have with the province. We have a special projects officer for federal schools who's now spending time in Six Nations, and she will be here for 1 year. Her name is Kathleen Manderville. She will be here for 2 weeks of the month on Tyendinaga, and she will be the link between the principals and the Department of Indian Affairs. She will be in position for 1 year until Indian Affairs rewrites the job description for the superintendent, which they hope to fill next year. So Councillor Helen Miller, Laurie Davis-Hill, and Arliss Skye and myself had a meeting with Mrs. Manderville on August 24th so that we can talk about how we can interact with the schools, because we do have the school nurse program there, and we have other programs that we want to get into the school. The Elders Network also held their annual fish fry on August 26th. And on the 29th, there was the Miles to Go All-Night Cancer Walk. And I want to thank Andrea Hill and Terry Hill and her committee who helped organize this. It was a fantastic event. I did go over and do a few walks and made some donations. And then I was lucky enough to win the 50-50. And I donated $500 back of that. So because it's an important cause that we need to acknowledge and support. At the end of the month, I was also invited to speak at the Amadea Convention in Mississauga, and I spoke there along with the Ontario Regional Chief Isidore Day. It was quite an event because it's a Muslim organization and there were 20,000 people there. And it was also telecast around the world to their different stations. And so they had approached us and asked us to speak because they are interested in finding out more about First Nations. So we were happy to do that, and maybe we can establish a relationship with them because they are their theme is to promote peace and love and not hatred, and much of the same as we want to do. And I found a lot of similarities. So I think they would prove to be good allies for us as we continue our struggles. So we'll see where that goes, and hopefully they'll come and visit at the Woodland Cultural Center and learn more. On September 1st, myself, Councillor Ray Miracle, and Councillor Carl Hill took part in the groundbreaking to launch the construction of the Landscape of Nations, which is a memorial being constructed at Niagara-on-the-Lake at Queenston Heights. And it's a memorial for the Council of Peace and Reconciliation Treaty between the British Crown and the First Nations, which was done following the War of 1812. It's going to be a beautiful memorial once it's established, and the official opening is planned for June 21st, 2016. Tim Johnson is the co-chair of the working group. That's Tim from the Bears Inn, and Rick Hill is also involved, and Raymond Sky is one of the artists who is working on the sculpture. So Six Nations is certainly involved in this project, and it's going to be a grand opening next year when it's completed. On September 2nd, we had Chris Ballard, who is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Premier, and who is also responsible for the Treasury Board. He was at Six Nations Polytech to make an announcement of over $400,000 in funding out of the local Poverty Reduction Fund. This is the project that's going to be run out of Polytech and as well as Brantford, and it's going to help people get back into the area of education. I also took part in an information session on the Launchpad, which is a project being run through the Six Nations Development Corporation under the leadership of Amy Lickers and in partnership with Laurier University. And it is a project that's going to help young business entrepreneurs who are just starting and help show them the ropes and help them along to, get their businesses going and hopefully succeed. And that was held on September 3rd. We also had a provincial cabinet minister here, Minister Glen Murray, who is the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. He was here on September 3rd, and he met with our Drainage Committee, who is working on solving some of the drainage problem areas that we have in our community. We have engaged Greenland to help us with that, and they are doing a study right now on the Mackenzie Creek. And we have wanted to inform Mr. Murray about this so that we can possibly get some assistance from them later on and for the next phases of this project. We also had Matt Jameson from the Six Nations Development Corporation come in and speak to Minister Murray about all of our renewable energy projects, which are so important, particularly with respect to his other portfolio, which is climate change. And earlier this week, on September 8th, I attended a political confederacy leadership meeting with other leaders in Ontario, and we met with Minister David Zimmer, the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, to talk about how we can move forward on the articles that are included in the political accord. On Wednesday, I attended a session, an Aboriginal Forum on Reconciliation at Queen's Park in the Lieutenant Governor's Suite. She had invited a number of individuals to come and talk about next steps with respect to the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations. And Dr. Marie Wilson, who is one of the commissioners, was there to talk about the way forward. And it was an exciting event with a number of influential people there, which meant that I took the opportunity to promote the Save the Evidence campaign, which is in place to try and replace the roof at the old mush hole, or the Mohawk Institute, and also to do repairs on the inside and establish an endowment fund. I was also in Toronto for the press conference and the reception for the launch of the Chiefs of Ontario Who Is She campaign, which is a campaign that is being launched to raise funds so that we can do our own inquiry about missing and murdered Aboriginal women. That launch was just held the other day, and we encourage you to follow the Chiefs of Ontario website and check out the Who Is She campaign, and to also encourage people to contribute to the campaign. As I mentioned, the residential school survivors were here from Toronto this week, and our lacrosse teams, international lacrosse teams, are here. And last night we also had the Memorial for Life Festival at the Community Hall, and that was to help promote the Suicide Prevention Week, which is happening right now. And it was well attended, and I want to commend the health and social staff for putting this together. And it was a good event, and I think we all as a community and everybody need to work and let people know how important they are, and that if their suicide is not necessary, and everybody cares, and you just need to outreach, and people are there that are willing to help you.